Hello and welcome to this extra special steamy edition of Caged In presents Coppola Connections. This one's a bit different to how we usually do things because we have broken the rules, baby. We are talking about a film that has no Coppola connection whatsoever, but is part of a trilogy that does have Coppola connections, and we really needed to talk about this one. It is, of course, the first in the 50 Shades trilogy, 50 Shades of Grey. And my guest is Charlie Vero-Martin, who will be joining me for the whole 50 Shades saga. One dropping today, one dropping in the Christmas perineum, and the final episode dropping on, well, as close to Valentine's Day as we can get it. We'll be talking about all the ins and outs of this film, every whip, slap and shag that happens. So spoiler warnings do apply. If you're new to this podcast, what we usually do is watch every single film in the collective Coppola family filmography to determine, are they the greatest film family of all time? Obviously, we'll be getting into that when we get to 50 Shades Darker and the Coppola connection being John Schwartzman, who was the DOP for the second and third installment in this franchise. However, now it's time to get stalked by a businessman, sign some NDAs in a weird sex contract, as we don't make some Coppola connections. This week's film has no Coppola connection whatsoever, but it is the first in a trilogy that does. When I floated this to this week's guest, they said, we could just talk about this on the second in the trilogy episode as a little bit, but I feel like there's too much to talk about, so we're going to have to talk about the whole thing. The film in question is the first in the 50 Shades trilogy. 50 Shades of Grey, released in 2015, directed by Sam Taylor Johnson, adapted to the screen by Kelly Marcel, who recently wrote Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Based on the E.L. James novel of the same name, this film stars Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan, Jennifer Earle, and Marcia Gay Harden. So, joining me in Mr. Grey's playroom to discuss whether this film is orgasmic bliss or just a big old pile of abusive shit is writer, comedian, and actor Charlie Vero-Martin. How are you, Charlie?
Hello, I'm well, thank you. I would actually like to put it on record right now that when we first discussed the idea of me coming onto this show, I signed up to talking about saving Mr. Banks.
Yes, you did.
And somehow I've ended up doing a 3-part episode about the 50 Shades trilogy.
Well,
and I just want to put it on record that wasn't how I expected things to go.
You have instantly come into the Coppola Connections Hall of Fame by, I think flippantly. Like, I put out an open call being like, anyone want to come talk about the 50 Shades of Grey films? And you went, yeah, that could be fun. And I think for you it was a flippant remark. For me it was like, right, that's logged. Like, and I the only reason we're not talking about saving Mr. Banks, and here's a great little connection as well, is co-written by Kelly Marcel. So there is a connection to that film. So we're not out of the, I don't know, we're not out of the world of still being tangentially connected.
Did this mean that, so did you put the call out, because I was like, oh yeah, at some point we've said we'll talk about saving Mr. Banks. Had you approached other people about doing 50 Shades and they'd refused? And so you had to put the call out?
No, I just put the call out because I was like, you never know. There could be there could be people I know or whatever who are ardent fans. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's that thing of, I just give like when I invite people on the podcast, like I did with you, I just send them
The list. Yeah.
a Google Sheets list and be like, pick a film. And then yeah, I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was like, this one feels like if somebody's willing to agree to do it on Twitter, they must have some interest in the film. So yeah.
I mean, I'd never seen the film until having to watch it for this.
Mhm.
But I think I was like, I couldn't remember when we'd agreed to do Saving Mr. Banks. And I was like, well, I don't mind. I'll watch either. Let's do this one. And I think they are very different films.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the only reason we're not doing Saving Mr. Banks is there's like, as you can imagine, there's so many people who just like jump at the chance to talk about Jason Schwartzman films. So I'm kind of like
Right.
in this like to and fro of like, do I just like, I don't know, like I nearly said, well, I'm going to say it anyway, blow my load too early on loads of Jason Schwartzman. That feels like a terrible phrase to use, especially when talking about 50 Shades of Grey.
I mean, it feels like the most appropriate phrase to use.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel we're going to get into saying far much worse things. So,
so
and also on the same level of not very sexy as well.
So obviously you said that this was your first time watching the film, but how aware were you of the phenomenon that is the 50 Shades of Grey like universe?
I was fairly aware. I've not read the books either. I remember when the books came out, hearing lines from them and being like, no, I don't want to read that. I don't want to see it. And I remember I worked in an office for a few years that I really hated. And there were like women in the office who like read the books and thought it was the sexiest thing in the world. And I was just like, no, this just does. I feel like if this is sexy for you, I don't know if it's sexy for me, which sounds really harsh actually now that I say that out loud. But that's kind of there's certain people in my head that I used to work in an office with who used to love the books and the films, and so I very much attach it to them. And you know when you're like, I don't want to imagine colleagues' sex lives.
Yes.
That's yeah. So it's like I don't need to imagine her sex life. And also I remember like having quite a few friends who like work in the sort of like who work in like sex work or speak very openly about um like sexuality and female sexuality being like this isn't actually a very positive move for female sexuality, and I'm like, okay, I don't need to invest in this then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, and I did actually think when you asked, when I signed up to saying, I'll watch this film. I did think maybe I should read the book first because I do tend to like to read books along with watching the films, and then I thought, no, you're not paying me.
I thought about it like since this is kind of like was on the list, every month when I get my Audible like email being like, you have a new credit, I'm always like, should I? And I just there's something well, I guess it's best to talk about the kind of the beginnings of E.L. James's novels and the fact that they're Twilight fan fiction, and she's described it herself as like it's this is like her midlife crisis was writing these novels, and it's like
I didn't realize she was British. I thought she was American or Northern American, and until when I looked her up, and I was like, oh, she's from like Buckinghamshire or something.
Yeah.
She's English, and I was like, oh, crazy. But also because I'd heard initially that it was Twilight inspired, I assumed that it was also going to be somewhat mystical, and then it's like, oh no, it's just about like a guy who works in an office. Like, that's it. Like it's not. I was like, how is any of this sexy?
What?
If it had been BDSM with vampires, then I could have maybe got it. But I'm like, what's the connection? I don't know.
Well, I think if this was like based in a fantasy land, it could get away with a lot of the stuff that it does, because we'll we'll dive into it a bit further on down the line, but the messaging in this film is icky. Like it makes you feel
Yeah.
gross. And to your point of like the people who would read the books and kind of talk about it, I remember my mum read these
Right.
books and like to that point of
Yeah.
like not want like if do you know what I mean? And she's kind of like going, oh, I read a bit. Oh, there's a bit last night.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's been like, well, I don't want to know what that is.
Exactly.
Like yes.
I don't want to be sharing sexual fantasies with you. Like,
Oh.
no, that's not our relationship. No, that's I think that's it. The sort of people I knew who were really into it, I was like, okay, we don't need to have this in our relationship. Definitely not.
So
Blech.
as different as this episode is, I'm still going to ask you, like I do to all my guests,
Okay.
to give us a brief plot synopsis of this film. Kind of set it up for us before we dive into it.
Well, I mean, it's a classic girl meets boy kind of story. She is a student who's about to graduate, even though she doesn't have a working computer, which first thing I didn't understand. And she falls for this guy who's like a young multimillionaire, who she's interviewing, and basically she kind of she falls for him and he falls for her, and that should be fine, except for he's gone through child abuse and is obviously traumatized and then is gaslighting her into an unhealthy sexual relationship. And we think it's all okay because we like capitalism. That would be my summary of it all.
That is a perfect synopsis for this film. It's not a lot happens. Film's got a 2-hour runtime, so like
2 hours and it ends on a cliffhanger. Like, no,
it very much feels like I don't know, like you know, like how the Hobbit. It's like films. They're like that's one book that is separated into 3 films, and it very much felt like that in a way. In the fact that there's not enough. It didn't feel like there was enough story to pad out a whole film, and it's like
there's not even enough sex to pad out a whole film. That's 2 hours.
Like, if it was wall to wall banging, I would have been like, right, this is salacious, this is grimy, this is dirty. Like, let's really get balls out and go for it. But it doesn't do that.
But it doesn't. It doesn't. I think how many sex scenes are there? Are there 4?
Yeah, like, and they're all like the sex in this. We'll get into it. And I said it's vanilla as hell. Like for a film that kind of is about BDSM, supposedly. Like, I read online that like you saying about speaking to friends. This doesn't get the dom sub relationship.
No,
right
but also it also kind of makes it worse as well. It gets all the things that are maybe good about that, like being consensual and communicating what you want and what you need, and having like a relationship that's like sexually open and like open with your partner and not shameful. But makes it all of those things. It makes it one-sided and kind of, I don't know, like not consensual, and it's very weird. It gets all the things that could have been nice and healthy about this wrong, and all the things that could have been like, ooh, salacious and fun, boring.
Yes, yeah. Well, let's kind of talk. Like you mentioned. That like she goes to interview him. That is literally how this film opens, right? It's kind of like I was like, are we going to get to know anyone here? And it is kind of like bang into it, and this is the kind of chat we get in that meeting.
You are very young to have amassed such an empire. To what do you
I owe my success?
Yep.
Seriously?
Yes.
Business is about people. And I've always been good at people.
No, you're not.
What motivates
You're a
them,
bad
what
people person.
incentivizes them, what inspires them.
No, you're not. You gaslight
Maybe you're
them.
just lucky.
That's also rude.
I've always found that the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have. The key
Yeah.
to my success has been in identifying talented individuals and harnessing their efforts.
So you're a control freak?
Oh, I exercise control in all things, Miss Steele.
It's so gross.
It's so. Do we ever find out what he actually does?
No, like, so my notes for this film is a litany of questions that, like,
What does he actually do for a living?
what does he do? Like, like, why should we care? Like, I don't know. Like, this film really tries to, in those opening moments, really paint a picture, especially like who she is. We're supposed to believe like
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
she's innocent and twee because she wear and like she's a plain
Yeah.
Jane, right?
can we? Okay, so I have quite a lot to say about that. 'Cause in my summary, I almost said about how like. So actually, I think I am the opposite to everything this film wanted the audience to think. I feel like it was meant to start off with you thinking, "Oh, she's just like you. She's just like any normal college graduate girl." And she's like, and I'm like, and then you grow to be like, "What are you doing? You love And I went the opposite way. I started off by thinking she was smug and rude. and then I grew to like her more. Because in her first line is she's saying, also, I don't get, we can get into this later, like, I am not a fan of how the relationship between her and her flatmate and her mum are written. I find both relationships like, blech. But at the start, when she's like, "Oh, are you okay? Do you have the questions? Are you taking my car? Blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "I've got a GPS and a 4.0 GPA." It's like, all right, like, get over yourself. Like, so does she. She's valedictorian. Like, I would never talk to a friend like that. I would never be like, "Excuse me, I have a master's degree. Don't tell
Yeah.
me what to do." And it's like, well, you literally almost forgot the recording device. So get over yourself. Like, her first line made me think, all right,
Yeah.
mug bitch. Like,
What I think in that we're supposed to, like the things they show us about like the way she's dressed and she's supposed to be quirky because she's got an old beat up Beetle.
oh
it's-
no.
But the thing, like, I was really confused as the relationship to who she was talking to at the beginning. Like,
Hmm.
it's like that's like it suffers from that problem that a lot of kind of American stuff does, where it's older people playing young, and and the fact that their apartment for two like
Oh, of course.
students looks like a kind of bougie East End office. There's like a bike on the wall. There's exposed
Yeah.
brick. I was like, oh, does she work for a magazine? And this is like her boss kind of sending her out on an assignment. And then it's like,
Yeah.
maybe I missed something in the open exchange, but like it's only kind of later on you realize, oh no, that's her mate Kate.
Yeah, exactly. Also, like, I've just remembered that for a while in sort of early 2000 films, there was like a spate of people cycling indoors in films. And I think like it happens in like Rent and actually it happens in a lot of 1960s French films. I think that's what they're trying to like reinvent. It's like, "Oh, we're so quirky. We cycle indoors." And I'm like, "How is your apartment that big?"
Yeah.
Yeah, no, her flat's far too huge. It's the thing is, it's not necessarily that the actors are older playing younger. It's written by older people playing younger, and also this whole thing. It happens in like Fleabag and stuff as well, where we want to see female friendships, where it's all like very kissy, and like there's a bit where she steals her sandwich. If my like all of my flatmates throughout uni and since have been some of like my best friends in the world ever. And if any of them fucking stole my fucking sandwich after I'd already offered to make them one, which I probably wouldn't have done either, I'd be like, fuck you. I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? You weirdo. Like, that just wouldn't happen. But those are the sort of things, it's like, oh, we all like snuggle up and we're like totally cool with each other having sex on the sofa. And it's like, actually, no, that's a thing. But like, you know, all that kind of, yeah. And I'm like, ugh, that's just not what female friendships I feel are really like.
Well, I don't think this film gets any relationships right.
Female relationships.
Or any like human relationships.
Human relationships.
Like during that kind of first office meeting, I like in my notes it says like, that they are not talking like humans. Like they're not talking like, they are talking like fucking robots, or I don't. It's so bizarre, and I think the flaw of this really stems down to E.L. James's like source text, because apparently it is poorly written. That's like what a lot of people have told me. Is kind of the subject matter is salacious, but the writing is bad.
Yeah, I feel like we should say, because we're obviously going to rip right into it. It's like, obviously, this woman has managed in her middle age to completely recreate herself and find herself a millionaire. Like, she's probably a millionaire now, and it's like, all fair play to E.L. James. She is not listening to this podcast. We are clearly bitter.
Well, the thing is,
like, congratulations to her. Now let's rip into her book.
I went into this film kind of going, right, like, I'm going to try and find stuff in it I can enjoy. And my first note is, oh, that's a pretty good cover of I Put a Spell on You. It kind of like, I was like...
it's Annie Lennox.
Exactly. And there's great, like, the music in this. And like
the soundtrack is actually really good.
Yeah, it's that kind of post The Weekend, like, really, like, sleazy R&B, isn't it? That kind of everything slowed, even down to the, like, Beyonce cover that's the Beyonce like reworking that's done on the.
Although saying that, so my partner, who flat out refused to watch this with me, I watched it on my own first of all, and then I was rewatching it just now, and he flat out refuses to watch a lot of films, but you have to walk through our living room between our bedroom and our kitchen, so like he'll walk through every now and then and be like, what is going on? And and the sex scene where it's which is happening to Beyonce's slow down
Crazy
in Love. He was like, why does this feel like they're having sex in a John Lewis advert?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because any song slowed down that shouldn't be slowed down, just immediately you think is a John Lewis advert. And it's like, wow, I'm sure that's what they were going for.
There's one scene, I think it's like quite near the end on the thing of the soundtrack. I think it might be like one of the later sex scenes in the playroom that sounds like when he flogs her. That sex scene sounds like it is scored by the like title music to Mr. Bean, like, you know, that kind of like choral, like, oh
yeah.
And it's like,
I think it's Sia or something at that point.
Oh well, yeah, shit, like, whoa.
But the rest of the time it's Danny Elfman.
Yeah,
so you're not far off.
That blew my mind.
Yeah,
I was like,
Danny Elfman. All right.
I thought, like, when pulling clips, and you'll probably be able to hear them throughout this episode in some of the clips, the music's got this, like, the Danny Elfman stuff. It's got a weird, like, jauntiness to it. It's definitely got a Danny Elfman vibe to it that kind of like, what is this film going for?
I feel like that's exactly what Danny Elfman said. They like approached Danny Elfman and like, would you do the scoring for this? And he's like, really? Me? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And he just continued doing the job, being like, really? Me? Okay. That's kind of like there all the way through the score.
So obviously, like, yeah, this is directed by Sam Taylor Johnson, who made her
Mm,
directorial debut with Nowhere Boy,
Nowhere Boy.
with
Yeah.
her which stars her now husband Aaron Taylor
Mm.
Johnson.
So I didn't realize this until literally just before because for some reason I didn't think to look up the director a week ago when I first watched it. And then I looked that up and I was like, ah, right. And I don't know how much I'm gonna say about this, but like he was how old when they did Nowhere Boy?
18,
Seven,
and she
18,
was
and she was
42.
40. Yeah. Yeah, that just kind of like if it were the other way around, if it were a 40-year-old guy with an 18-year-old girl, everyone would be like, ugh. And it's like, yeah.
What feels like bizarre when talking about this film and kind of like looking at Sam Taylor Johnson is one of the like the kind of a backstory to Christian Grey's kind of
Yes.
like
Yes.
the way he is, the beast that he is
Yeah.
from a kind of a power dynamic like that of a kind of woman in power. In this case, it's one of his mum's kind of. You get the impression
Yeah.
like a kind of a powerful, like a woman in power that has kind of taken advantage of him when he was 15. Obviously.
15, exactly. Like, and it's like, so that is child abuse, that is
Mhm,
pedophilia, that is sexual abuse. And it's
mhm,
like, so when I watched that the first time around, I was like, this is like huge. This is really heavy.
mhm,
And it only later on that like what's her name? Anna, like says it's like she was a child abuser. And I'm like, thank you for finally calling it what it is.
mhm.
Um and then yeah, when I read that recently that it was, oh, that's the director. Maybe that's why she like I don't know, it seems wrong to like because he was 18, so, like, technically but there is that sort of power dynamic, and it was weird, and it's like, is that maybe why she's maybe not given it as much weight as I feel like it should be given in this film?
Mhm.
Like,
But
that
and
seems like a very weighty issue.
definitely, and probably not one that should be delved into on this podcast, especially in regards to Sam Taylor Johnson and Aaron Taylor Johnson, because they're still married, so they must be.
Yeah,
They
they must
we
be
can only
happy
assume
and
they're
fine.
happy. Exactly. It must be consensual
Yeah.
on both parts, and yeah, they're loving it. But what do you make to her direction of this film? Like, is it put together well? Is there stuff in there where you go, oh, that's actually all right?
It's weird. So there are some things. It's like every time something seems to go well, I'm like, oh, that's quite, and then it suddenly lets me down. Like
Mhm,
that, it kind of goes on a seesaw like that. And bearing in mind when I made these notes, I didn't know it was her making it, and some of it I don't know. It's like how much of it was in the books, and therefore you can't say more out with the books. I'm Scottish, so I say out with.
mhm,
Um, like, so one of the things I have written down is contraception, the sort of how contraception is dealt with in general throughout the
yes.
film, because there are two sex scenes where I believe there's two where like he stops and put a condom on, and I'm like, fair enough. You don't see that often enough in sex scenes in
Yes.
films, and I'm like, well done. That you showed that you can still have a sex scene with someone putting a condom on, and that's not the least sexy thing about the sex scene. um, and it's like, exactly, right? Because it's like the only reasons those scenes aren't sexy sex scenes isn't because he stops and put a condom on. Uh, but then there's the whole weird thing about her in the contract of him being like, you will see my doctor and you will go on the pill and all this stuff,
Mhm,
which I found kind of odd because it's like, I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, okay, in America, uh, contraception isn't free. If it had been sort of framed as like, I have health insurance, I will make sure you get everything you need to be healthy, and I will, hook you up with my doctor because they're good and they'll give you everything you need, then fine. But it wasn't like that. It was like, you will go. on and it's like, what if she has a blood clotting disorder and can't have oral contraception?
Yeah.
What if she'd prefer the implant? I don't know. And it was just little things like that felt like oddly, like it could have been so easily something like really interesting and progressive, but very much went the other way to being quite demanding and, I don't know, icky. Icky is the word, isn't it?
Yeah, well, let's talk about his kind of behavior in the early stages of this film, because obviously they have that first meeting where it's kind of it's it's got some
You're so hung up on that first interview.
I am. Well, like the way she's portrayed, where it's like, is she really gonna fall through a door to kind of show us that she's supposed to be like
Oh, I'd
vulnerable
forgotten about that.
and klutzy and
Oh, I think I'd actually removed that from my brain.
ugh.
God, I'm delving into things that were just more personal to me, and then I forgot there's the like the whole like, oh, I'm such a klutz. It's like, oh, she can't be pretty and also graceful because that makes her a bitch. We'll need to make her clumsy, because that's the only way women can be sexy on screen is if they're falling over or like eating a burger. That's the only thing.
Look, and like, 'cause obviously they get caught in. Do they kiss on that first meeting? Am I getting things confused? Is this when they like throw themselves? Oh no, it's later on when they throw
No,
themselves
it's
into the.
later on. So the first time they go into the lift and it's like, goodbye. And we're meant to feel like there's sexual chemistry there, and I didn't feel any sexual chemistry at all. It was like, all right, bye. Thanks for the interview. And then the second time they're going into a lift and it's like, oh, you need to sign the contract. And he's like, fuck the contract. And they start making out, and then other people get in the lift and they have to stop. And again, I was kind of like, oh, they're kissing. I didn't feel that was about to come. Like, all right.
How they try and convey to us as well that she is like deeply attracted to him that first time she leaves the office is just a shot of her that like can only be described like she looks like she's coming. She kind of like throws her
Or
head back.
hyperventilating.
Yeah, she's like, like kind of like jolts her body. That is the audio equivalent of the kind of movement she does. Because it's like I was like, okay, we like there's subtler ways to kind of do is it playing with the kind of tension like would have been
there's
better.
no tension.
No, like as that clip I played showed you, like the dialogue is massively stilted. It's like,
Yeah.
and you get the impression that like she feels even younger than what she's like 21. Like
Yeah.
she feels like a kind of like 15-year-old, and then we get to the point where they like eventually do have sex, and we find out she's a virgin. Which for me, like, I'm not a prudish guy, but like I was like, this feels even more icky than it already does
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he is like, and it feels like what it's doing is it's not just being I don't know, abusive to her. It's abusive to the audience as well because it's kind of lulling the audience into this thing of like, oh, this is like a relationship you could have, or like, isn't this the ultimate fantasy? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh no, he is like abusing the fact that she's never had any sexual
She
experience.
doesn't know. Exactly. I 100% agree. And especially, and this is what I mean in terms of the whole, like, if you're going to do like submissive, dominant, that kind of relationship, like he starts off by saying, because she's like, well, how do I know what I like? And he's like, well, what have you liked in sex before? And then we'll talk about that. And she's like, well, I've never had sex or any kind of sexual encounter before, so I don't know. And rather than him, because his initial conversation of being like, let's have a conversation about what you like and we'll build on that from there, which to me does sound like would be a kind of normal, healthy discussion to have before going into that kind of thing. Instead, it's like he hears, oh, I've never had any kind of sexual encounter. So he's like, okay, I'll have sex with you once. And now I'll expect you to make a whole ton of decisions off that one encounter.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, it goes so close to being like, oh, I could see how this could be a nice, like, thing, and then it's like, oh, and then it veers off into abusive and weird.
Mm. Well, yeah, because we kind of like we get these moments like obviously she's done the interview with him. That's gone. Stop dwelling on the interview, Petros. Move on.
Oh no, but I actually think I have some stuff to say about the interview. No. Oh, the whole line about like what made you fall in love with English literature? Was it Jane Austen or blah, blah, blah? And I'm just like, I just wrote book next to it,
Well, yeah,
which is
we get that whole thing as well. Like his PA comes in, he's like your next meeting is ready. He's like, cancel it. I'm not done with this one. And then like literally 5 seconds, she's like, nah, I'm kind of done. I've asked if you're gay. Like I've kind of
Yeah, she's so rude in that interview because so like actually when you said, oh, she comes off like she's 15, I don't know because I feel like if I were a 21-year-old me or 15-year-old me going in to interview someone who's super busy and I'm like interviewing them for like my school newspaper, what a thing, I'd be like super like she just seems like, oh, I don't give a shit, I don't care, blah blah blah. And I'm like, this guy's busy. Like your friend has trusted you with
Mhm.
this thing. Like take it a little bit seriously. There, like I kind of got really annoyed with her. Like you're being so. It's like, oh, maybe you're just lucky. And I'm like, you're being such a stroppy teenager. Like I'm surprised he's not like, all right, fuck off then.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you
Like,
know?
but then obviously she must have done something right because he spends the kind of like the next half hour of the film essentially stalking her, right? So like
I mean, maybe that's it because he wants to punish her for being stroppy, but I don't think that's what I think we were meant to get the whole, oh, she's just like strong-willed
Mhm.
and, Jane Austen-y, and it's, oh, I hate that whole
Yeah, it's
thing.
it's bizarre, right? Because we're supposed to like believe that she is almost like this deer in a headlights, like kind of up
Right.
against this like monster truck of sexual energy and like BDSM coming towards her and like frightened by it all. But as you said,
Yeah.
like you get this impression that she's kind of like, whatever. I work in a hardware store. Like, come on, like what is that about as well? Why is she working in a hardware store?
Right, okay, I've got some thoughts on the hardware store. Right. First of all, I think I would really love to work in a hardware
Yeah,
store.
yeah.
I, for a long time, have found those kind of shops. You basically, when you go into shops where like they have lots of boxes of the same things, like haberdasheries and
Mm.
hardware stores, I find hugely satisfying places to be in. Like seeing a crate of like taps, I think is kind of fun.
Yep.
Um, or like a crate of plugs, or like lots of like, I don't know, I just think it's nice to see lots of the same thing in one place.
Or
I
just
don't know.
being able to have the knowledge to kind of like someone needs to fix something,
Yeah.
kind of, oh, you're gonna need this. You need the
Yeah.
1/4 inch. Don't worry, I got you. I got you. Pull
The
it.
1/4
Yeah,
inch
got a
doesn't
little
refer to anything in particular.
got
The
a little
1/4
pencil
inch.
behind your ear and a tape measure on your belt, just being like,
Yeah.
don't worry, I got you sorted. I got you sorted. Come on over here.
I love being in those kind of shops. I love having a reason to go to those kind of shops.
Mhm.
So I think I kind of part of me gets like, I'm happy she works in a hardware store. It's better than her working for like a magazine or like somebody's PA or like an architect or whatever. Like, get a lot of those. But thing I maybe should have asked some American friends before this. So he asks for masking tape and she gives him gaffer tape.
Or like electrical tape, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
but masking tape is different.
Oh, masking
that-
tape you would not use to bind anyone, right? Masking tape.
Exactly, it breaks immediately.
Yeah. Like, yeah, masking tape's like if you want to cut in a ceiling, or do you know what I mean? Like the wall. Like
Yeah,
you
you're
wanna,
doing like some painting and
Yeah.
you want to like strip off a bit, like
some fine
yeah.
detailing. Yeah. But that is the thing. Like, yeah. So he basically the only thing I can imagine is why she works in a hardware store is so he can come in and kind of like we get the allusions to his kind of like is he
Oh yeah,
is he a
yeah.
serial killer? Is he a sex demon? Like, because he kind of
Yeah.
comes in with his shopping list of what is it? Is
Cable
cable
ties.
ties,
Masking tape apparently.
and rope. And like, I think she makes a remark, right? She kind of says to him, like, "What are you, a serial killer?" And he's like,
Yeah, you're the full serial killer. Yeah.
"Yeah," and he's like, "Not today." And I was like, "That is the thing. This film flirts too long with the idea that it's
Oh
gonna
yeah.
be like a real 90s like erotic thriller, and it's like,
Yeah.
if it was that, if this is kind of like sex and death, I'm kind of all about that. I've been like on a big Brian De Palma binge at the moment, and I
Right.
stupidly watched Body Double on Friday, and
Right.
then like watched this over the weekend. So I'm kind of like, I've seen what an erotic thriller can be, and then I've seen
Yeah.
50 Shades of Grey.
This film gave me huge. Well, this is my. Well, so it gave me huge American Psycho vibes. Which I also read that book, and it's one of the few books. So a couple of years ago, I was sitting in a bar reading a book by myself, and a guy tried to chat me up, and he was like, "So what are you reading?" I was like, "American Psycho," not the book to chat with, and I was like, "Fuck off." Also a disgusting book that I don't think I even finished. I got like 3/4 of the way through it, and I was like, you know what? I don't need to finish this book. But yeah, I watched that film recently on my own for some reason. Um, and it just kind of got me thinking about like so much of like all the red flags about this guy, like from her mom and her friend, like especially her friend, are all just kind of like blown away
Mhm.
because he's rich.
Yep.
And it's like, if this guy was like, he could still be an attractive guy. I mean, I guess that's the sort of like Streetcar Named Desire thing, like the sort of like, oh, he's like, if he were like poor or whatever, working class and like rough around the edges, you can still find that hot if he's attractive. But you're kind of like, oh, he's dangerous. But because he's rich and is like, I'll buy you clothes, I'll take you in a helicopter, I'll give you an apartment. It's like, oh, well, obviously you do everything he says.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's so dangerous that we're just like, well, he's got lots of money, so we can overlook all this other crap
Well,
and be like,
it's
it's
real
a
world dangerous,
fantasy.
right? It's kind of like, it's that thing of like, it is those people, as we've kind of like, and this film obviously came out in 2015 and was like the books were written before, but it very much plays with something that obviously like the Me Too movement really shone a light on that thing of men in
Mm-hmm.
like moneyed men in power really fucking taking advantage of women. And
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is like Me Too, the
Um,
fucking movie.
But like, well, this is the thing. It's like this is why. But what I find nerve wracking about it is like things like American Psycho came along came along way like that's based in the 80s,
Hmm.
and it's like so we've known about this, and it's just like if anything, I'm more like nervous about that kind of thing. It's like there's so many instances where she's like alone with this guy, and it's like she could fully disappear. Like no one would know where she
Hmm.
was. But because it's like she makes so many comments about the fact about how clean he is.
Hmm.
This is something I also find as like I think is a little it's like shaming of the BDSM thing. It's like, it's not like normal BDSM people. They're dirty. That's dirty. That's sleazy. No, no, he's nice and clean. It's
Hmm.
different. It's different with him. And I'm like, that doesn't make it different. It certainly doesn't make it better. But like that way of differentiating it from other sort of stuff you might have heard of.
Yeah. Well, like
Um,
he's
very
like,
wrong.
they're like, is red flags waving constantly with this guy. Like, I think it's very early on when it's in the hardware store, or like I think it's at the photo shoot perhaps, and like any like male, yeah, it's at the photo shoot, right? Because we're
Mm,
introduced to Jose early on as well, which I thought like I kind of wrote in my notes
yeah.
like, this is going to be some conflict throughout the story, and it's kind of like he's introduced, he's in two other scenes, and then we never see him
To
again.
see him again.
I was like, okay,
Bye
that's
bye, Jose.
no way, Jose, you're going to be in this film.
Exactly.
Because, like, yeah, like he's there asking any like male that she has interacted with. He's seen her like interact. He's just
Yeah.
going, "So is that your boyfriend? Are you fucking the guy you work with at the hardware store?" It's like if, like,
Mm,
if I was dating anyone who like kind of was questioning me, or like went on a date with someone and they
yeah.
were questioning me like that on the first date, I'd be like, you know what? I ain't got any
None of
time
your
for this.
business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you know what? Chad from the hardware store. We had a real fucking crazy one on the Christmas do, and I let him put a finger in my bum. That's like that. It is what it is,
Yeah.
Christian. Leave me the fuck alone. Like, even if I
Yeah.
have, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah, Jose. They might have hooked up during university. What fucking big deal is it, Christian? Leave her alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, I do feel bad for the guy who's like, and he's like, oh, can we try one with you smiling? And everyone's like, oh my God, you asked him to smile. It's like, he's getting his fucking picture taken. Like,
Yeah.
why aren't you smiling? Why are you also, it took me a second watch to get the whole thing of like, oh, they're taking his picture because they can't get clearance for other pictures. And like, if you were able to get clearance to have an interview with the busiest man in business, apparently, I'm pretty sure they have like a stock photo that they like send people to use for stuff like that. Like, you don't have to have a whole on photo shoot for the guy.
He's got a fucking press release, right? He's got like,
Yeah.
he's got I don't know, a photo bucket. Well, they're sent like a photo bucket account where they're like, yeah, just download these or whatever. Yeah, he's definitely got some promo pics.
I mean,
that they
I
could
guess
use.
it's like him trying to be like, oh, well, it's, I mean, I think if he didn't fancy her, he'd be like, I'll send you the photo bucket. And he's like, oh, well, this is another excuse to see you. But then there was a bit of me that was like, Jose, why are you taking a picture of him in front of a grey background? Taking a picture of him in front of the campus, the university.
Yeah,
This just seems like a waste of time.
Well, he is Mr. Grey after all.
Right.
So we then, like, they go out for coffee, and I've got a clip of them talking once he saves her from nearly being hit by a speeding car.
Do you have a girlfriend? Is that it?
I don't do the girlfriend thing.
What is that even?
Watch it! I'm not the man for you. You should steer clear of me. I have to let you go.
Goodbye, Mr. Gray.
Oh, so this is somebody she has met like 2-3 times. Like not even had, I don't know, at this point has said maybe 100 words to each other. Do you know what I mean? And like, it's so dramatic. That music as well. Like, if I didn't know it was Danny Elfman, I'd be like, this is library music that they just wheel out for every Hallmark movie.
I think it's Danny Elfman being like, I guess we'll do some kind of like pendulum motif, like some kind of times ticking motif. I guess. I don't know. I see what he was trying to do. But like, to be fair, like, I can see how that situation where it's like, oh, we might never see each other again because he's so like famous and blah blah blah, we're different worlds, like how that could be dramatic. But, and as much as like I think both actors outside, I have never seen them look less attractive than they do look in this film. I think they're both very attractive actors.
Yeah.
But in this film, I don't think either of them look their best. And I don't think either of them really have that tension between them at all.
So let's talk about the chemistry between Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan. Like, it's non-existent, right?
It's really not. It's really, yeah. And I was really disappointed because, like, I have seen far more chemistry, like, on most sitcoms and things like that. Like, shows that aren't meant to be sexy. Like, and this film is just like, oh, this is meant to be the sexiest film where it's like, oh, they want each other, but they can't have each other because they don't know how they feel and it's conflicting. And I'm like, I feel like they could just walk past each other on the street and not care. Like, I don't know.
And you would have thought
I've had more sexual tension with, like, I don't know, a Coke stand than you have.
And what you would have thought is there would have been tons of screen tests. They would have kind of like matched in and out loads of different like actors to be like, oh, who is the kind of like, who are the two people we have in a room together where it's like fucking I
Yeah.
almost can't look at them because the sexual tension is so fucking strong.
Yeah. There actually is an SNL sketch that's basically that, where they have you seen that? I've not
No.
watched it since then, but they do this every now and then whenever a film like that comes out, where they do like screen tests and they do lots of impressions of celebrities, and they get like random celebrities to screen test for it that wouldn't work. But I honestly think like any of those actors would have more chemistry than they do. Because when they suddenly are like, oh, and then they rip off each other's clothes in the elevator, I'm like, oh, okay, sure. I didn't see that coming. Like, fine.
Well, I'm trying to figure out like who would be a better like casting for this, and like I don't know, because I think what works about this in a way for a lot of people is that they were both fairly unknowns at the time, right? And I guess
Right.
that's what they're trying to go for as well, is for people to get 100% believability in this, to kind of get lost in the fantasy that is 50 Shades. You kind of need
Yes.
unfamiliar faces to some degree. But I don't know. I even think, because we get a small part by Rita Ora in this
Oh yeah.
as Christian's sister, which like
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck's going on with that family.
Well,
But
he's adopted, isn't he?
yeah. And
Uh-huh.
I'm going to assume she is as well,
I
just
don't know,
because
yeah.
she is of like dual heritage, and
Yeah. And
her
they're two very white people are
y-
are his parents.
yes, yeah. Like yeah, that's all I got. And I imagine when we get to parts 2 and 3, I believe she might have more to do. I'm not sure. Seeing as
Yeah.
I don't know where this is going, so I'm only speculating that
I
she'll
don't
be
know
in it
who I
more.
would see, because it's hard to know. Because I do think Jamie Dornan is attractive,
Hmm.
and but I've not seen him really in a lot of stuff, to be honest. I've seen him in interview. I like him as. Do you know what this is? I think both actors I've seen in interviews, and I think I like both actors as people,
Yes.
but I've not liked any films they've been
Well,
in.
obviously Dakota
But both
Johnson.
actors as people, I think, are probably top people.
Dakota Johnson absolutely fucking owned Ellen, which is like one of like the best
Right.
things I've ever seen, where she kind of like outs her for being like, "Oh, you didn't invite me to your birthday party." And she's like,
Oh yes, I did see that.
I
She is
fucking,
good in that.
I fucking did, Ellen. You like
Yeah,
hag."
yes. And actually, there are a couple of moments in this film where I've given her a credit, where I've thought she has delivered some lines very well. I would say this is a this is something I say of a lot of plays I go to see and films I've seen, where I think the actors do fairly well with a very bad script.
Mhm.
And so like there's a couple of times where Dakota Johnson, I'm like, that was a very funny read of that line. Well done. Like when she's drunk and she says, I will launder this item. And I'm like, yeah, I can imagine you saying that. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Well done.
So that scene when she is drunk again, like we get more red flags, right? Because
He just comes out of nowhere, and it's like she's a student, like celebrating her graduation, her final exams. Like, let her go get drunk.
yeah, well, and she calls him because she flirts with the idea of deleting his number and then calls him,
Hmm.
and he insists that she goes home because she's been drinking. And then, like you said,
Yeah.
he turns up out of nowhere. Jose shoots his shot, doesn't he? He kind of says like, "I
Hmm.
fancied you since we first met," and like it's kind of like laughed at by Anastasia, and then
Hmm.
like she fucking faints, and that's
Oh,
kind of
that's
like scene
so
closed.
bad. Like
Oh,
that never happens. It never and it certainly never happens like that. If a girl is that blackout drunk, like it is way messier than that.
and nobody
Like,
says I'm gonna faint and then
yeah,
faints, right? Like you just fucking
no,
faint.
no, it doesn't happen. And it's like it's like they're trying to do this again. They're trying to do a thing and then they don't fully do it, and it comes off worse. Where like Jose's like, "Oh, we're gonna do this. We're gonna kiss." And she's like, "Oh, I don't know." And he like goes in for the kiss, and then like Christian comes in, he's like, she said no. And I guess that's meant to be a sort of like, yeah, you defend her honor and like, yeah, no means no kind of thing. But like, then he goes and does 10 times worse to her, of her being like, no, I don't think I do want you to like take away my free will. And he's like, but be open-minded. And it's like,
Yeah.
he is 10 times worse than what Jose is in that scene.
Well, and
And it's, yeah.
his kind of like I don't know, saving her from that situation is by taking her back to his apartment
Yeah.
and like
Yeah, which is super creepy.
making her wake up thinking she may have had sex and kind of joking about it, being like, well, I'm not into necrophilia. And it's like,
That's also a weird line.
it's fucking, and then we get like one of the fucking like weirdest power plays ever when he says this.
If you were mine, you wouldn't be able to sit down for a week.
What does that mean?
I gotta go take a shower.
And it's followed by him. He does that. He takes off his shirt, says, if you were mine, you wouldn't be able to sleep for a week. She's dumbfounded. He leaps onto the bed and just like takes a bite of her toast, which is a fucking weird flex, man.
What is it with people eating each other's food in this film? Like, first her friend eats her sandwich, and then this guy eats her toast. I'd be so pissed off.
Well, this is a guy who's a supposed like clean freak, doesn't like people touching him, but is more than happy to
Yeah.
get up in someone's business and eat their fucking slice of toast. So,
Yeah.
especially after like you must eat, Anastasia. You drank last night, and I cannot be with somebody who is inebriated. You must eat food, like the fucking robot.
And like, you vomited on your clothes, so I'm getting you new clothes. And it's like, well, nobody asked you to do any of that. You should have just taken her home, told her flatmate, hey, you need to take your friend home. I'll pay for you to get a taxi home. That's all that really needed to be done there.
Oh, it's fucking weird, right? And then is that when they leave, right? That's when, because he starts talking about like the written consent. He then starts floating the idea, right, of the kind of contract that would be involved.
The contract scene, I think, is possibly one of my favorites because it left me because basically when you don't know the person who's written it. So it could be that this is probably what it is, that the person who's written it is thinking anal fisting is the most severe thing that could happen sexually in BDSM. So her being like, fisting is off the table, and it's like, cool. I think from their point of view, it's like, and for what they think the audience's point of view is they're like, great, fisting is off the table. Everything else will be just like nice, like slow tapping with a feather. But from my point of view, it's like, okay, I imagine there's this contract with literally every single sexual activity on the planet written down, and the only thing she's crossed off is fisting. And I'm like, so to me, that makes me think that Anastasia is up for like a whole ton of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
And yeah.
So, like, whilst we've been chatting, I've been trying to find what, like, the contract, like, if there is, I imagine, like, there is, there's
an
a
actual
PD
template.
Yeah, well, like, what the, like, it must be written in the book, right, of what the, of what the actual contract, and it seems, I don't know, it seems like I'm gonna either have to fucking pay for something or like get like, or download it onto my laptop, which I don't particularly want to do.
I doubt that. I think it's just probably the sections that she reads out, but like not probably the whole, because this is what I mean. I'm like, what else? If that's all she's disagreed on, what has she agreed to?
Yeah.
Like, because to me, there feels like there's so much that could be far worse.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but even before we get to them reading out the contract, which is like a scene that I think needs a lot of attention because it's shot weirdly. It's a very weird setting, but we
yeah.
get like again, he does all this fucking weird shit with her. They kiss in the elevator, and
Oh yeah.
like his whole thing is just like he's abusive, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna pick you up from work, and we're gonna go in a helicopter, and I'm gonna fly you around the Seattle." So like, it's like it's
Yeah.
all forgiven, it's all forgiven, and then I'm gonna take you back to my apartment and put this upon you.
What's this?
It's a non-disclosure agreement. It means that you cannot discuss anything about us with anyone. I'm afraid my lawyer insists on it.
I'd never talk to anyone about us anyway. Are you gonna make love to me now?
Oh no, I know what's coming.
Two things. First, I don't make love. I fuck. Hard.
And the second thing?
Come.
So that's when he shows her the playroom, which
Oh, and I hear the music in the back that you're referring to.
no, that's not even that's not even the music I'm referring to.
Oh. Oh.
I don't have a clip of that. I really should have got a clip of that music because it's even more prominent in the scene because it's like
Right.
a near on silent scene apart from gasps of her being flogged and like
Right.
leather hitting skin with the Mr. Bean theme playing over the top at full volume.
But yeah, like the non-disclosure agreement, I get what she means. She's like, oh, you're a businessman, you don't want it going out in the press, you don't want me like selling my story to like some tabloid. I get that. And then he's like, no, that's not what this is about. And it's like, yeah, it's silly.
What,
It's very silly. And when he says, and I fuck, it's like, I'm glad she did laugh, but I would have full on laughed in his face.
Oh, I would have left. I would have left.
Well, left also, but like...
One line that did get a laugh out of me is when he says like, "This is my playroom." She's like, "Oh, what? You got like an Xbox and stuff like that in there?" And it's like, yeah, like that is like it kind of broke the tension for me for like what is quite a stuffy film really for something that's supposed to be like sexy.
Yeah.
It is weirdly like quite buttoned up and stuffy. And so what do you make of the playroom, Charlie? I got to get your opinions on this kind of the pleasure dome that he has there.
I feel like it's quite repetitive looking. There's lots of canes, and I'm like, do you really need that many? They all look very similar. Is it because he needs backup in case he breaks one? I was very distracted by that thought. I felt like I was like, okay, we're going to go into this room and we're going to see all of these things. And literally all we saw was a shelf of canes. And I was like, all right, I was expecting a bit more than that. Yeah.
I don't want to be like prudish or anything like that. Like I kind of like, I do like to think I'm sexually adventurous in some way, but I find the whole thing of like when you have to start like, when you've got a room in your house and you've got like, you've got tons of equipment, it kind of, for me, like you like it takes some of the excitement out of it, right? When it's like, it feels like forced fun. It feels like New Year's Eve where it's like,
organized fun.
yeah, we got to go in here and we got to do business, baby. It's like, where's romance? Where's a bit of like a bit of spontaneity in the situation? Like, it's weird.
It's like the first time you go to somebody's house, like a middle-class family's house, and they're like, this is the rumpus room. Like, this is the TV room, the room where the children are allowed to be. And I'm like, wow, you have a separate room in your house? Like, for that? Like, it's that kind of like, all right, but this is what I mean about like the sort of the fact that he's rich. it's like, takes her out in this helicopter and all that stuff to remind the audience and to remind her that he's super rich and therefore this is super exciting. And therefore him having a secret room in his like penthouse apartment that's like for sexy times is like, ooh, that's cool. But if you just went to a regular guy's house, like a regular flat, and he had a whole room just for that, you'd be like, oh, fuck off.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
this is
if
wrong.
you flicked a switch and a red light came on, and there's
Yeah.
like, do you know what I mean? If there was like, if you went around a guy's house and he owned 2 dildos, you'd probably be like, this is fucking
Exactly.
weird. Do you know what I mean? If you went to like, I
Yeah.
don't know, a flat in Bermondsey, and a guy was like, you got a flat, mate? I see you got a spare room. No, come in here, and it's like, I don't know, a lava lamp and a couple of dildos. I'm fucking getting out. I'm gonna be murdered. Do you know what I mean? I'm gonna be
Yeah.
living in a
Exactly.
pit. I'm gonna be living in a pit and be made to put lotion on my skin before I'm skinned alive. Okay.
But the thing is, technically, like for couples that are into that, or like not couples, even like people who are in relationships where that's what they do, it could be a perfectly healthy, loving,
Mm-hmm.
safe, consensual BDSM sexual relationship they're having in that room. But to put that on film would seem like, oh no, that's not okay. That's not allowed. But it's somehow much more acceptable mainstream if it's somebody who's been traumatized as a child and forcing a virgin young woman into a situation, that's all okay because he's rich. Like
Yeah.
that's I find really messed up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this leads to the first sex scene, which probably like this. I think this line goes to how unsexy this film is. She admits that she is a virgin, and he says, "Oh, it's time to rectify the situation."
Mm.
And like
Mm.
her response as well is supposed to be like, am I the situation? It's supposed to be sexy, and it's like, nah, like that's not sexy. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
You don't watch that and go, do you know what I mean? It'd be like being, I tell you, your bedroom talk being like, I gotta file these papers in
It's
the
admin.
basement. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh.
We gotta execute this meeting now.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's
I
all
got
admin. It's not fun. My other thing, I just realized, like, if somebody, even someone with a big apartment like that, if he showed me a playroom like that, which has like a 4-poster bed in it as well somewhere, like there's lots of rooms within that room. There's the room where like the scaffold gets brought down that she gets chained to, and then there's like the 4-poster bed and like the room with all the canes in it.
Yeah, there's
And
a
it's
Chesterfield as well, right? Like there's
yeah,
got a red
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chesterfield.
That they've stolen from like an old pub in Soho. And it's like, I think even with all this, I'd be like, what a waste of like space. Like I'd be like, we could put like we've got spare rooms we could put this in. Like
Mhm.
we could have like, I don't know, a crafts room in here. We could have another study. We could have a dining room. Like we could have a swimming pool. Like what a waste of a space,
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, you could have a sauna in there. Do you know, you could really have some
You could have a sauna, you could have like a steam room, a spa.
yeah, a bit of me
Even if they
time.
had some massage tables in there, it's like it could double up as something a bit sexy, but also a spa room.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. Kind of change the lighting. Do you know what I mean? Get some kind of shutters and some drapes to put over the real hardcore sex equipment, and get a couple of
yeah,
get a couple
throw
of
pillows.
nice.
And
Yeah.
it just, I feel like I'd be annoyed about, him be like, oh, this is my playroom. And I'm like, you've got enough space.
Oh yeah,
Like,
and
we
look,
could really do something with this room.
the thing is with a room like that is like it's the admin of it all as well. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that is the thing. Like there's nothing like unsexier than like imagine cleaning a room like that. Do you know what I mean? Like
the dust in that room, because you're not using all those canes in
Oh,
one go.
exactly. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and you can't I feel like you can't really like bleach things in the moment. And it's, yeah, as you say, it's the admin. You would need to make sure it was, so you would need to hire someone to make sure it was cleaned. And it's like, could you imagine someone like cleaning that? Like paying a maid clean that?
I reckon what he does is he gets maids, and like when people get to like build these secret rooms in people's houses,
Mm,
he kind of like gets a maid, and then like as they finish, he like chokes them out and then like disposes of them because he's really wealthy. Because it's like nobody could know about this. Do you know what I mean? He's like,
yeah,
or like,
all these people who are apparently having all these NDAs, like, or are you just sleeping with them? I don't know. Like,
yeah.
I find that, yeah. There's lots of running in that scene as well, isn't it? That montage about the contract. They're all going out for runs all the time.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I fucking hate about this film is that, like, and I think it's really fucking lazy in films, is
Yeah.
text and email conversations that like
Yeah.
appear on screen. It's like
Yeah.
you don't know how, like, this is sloppy. This is like not like it's you don't know how to kind of make what works on the page work well on
Yeah.
screen. And like the thing is, like, I've got a fairly big TV, but like I still had to kind of pause it and like get a bit closer to read some of it as well because it's fucking tiny. It's like I don't.
Again, it's like this is the thing. It's like, who is this film made for? I'm assuming it's made for middle-aged, like, women wanting to just like get their rocks off to Jamie Dornan. That's what I'm assuming, right? I don't think they want to have admin. I don't think they want to have to sit and read and like pause the screen halfway through to read what's going on.
But
Surely,
I don't.
like,
But the thing is, I think the people this is made for, they assume they don't give a fuck about that stuff. All they don't care about the drama of it all. They just kind of want the titillation and the kind of like, oh, I went
mm,
to see 50 Shades of Grey, like, because I
yeah.
I I worked at a cinema when this film came out,
Oh no,
and
God, what was that like?
it was just waves and waves of like your mum's mates. And I mean that is a broad term. Just like kind of like a lot of like Sharons and a lot of like
Right.
Tracys. Like, no offense if like there's anyone in your family or anyone listening like, oh, my mum's name's Sharon or Tracy, but like in Crawley, that is a kind of like a very specific kind of woman. And I remember there was like kind of there must have been ghost stories throughout like the whole of the country when this film came out, especially in cinemas. There was a thing that like one of the ushers found a cucumber in one of the
I
screens, and it's like,
find that really. But this is what I don't get. I'm like, so much of this film made me like close my knees tighter. Like, it's just like, so much of this film made me like ugh, and just kind of, if any of my friends found this attractive, I'd be like, red flag, like, this isn't the guy for you. So I find it kind of makes me kind of sad that for so many women this was like a big sexual release, and I'm like, really?
yeah,
Really? Because there's other films out there that are surely like, even just the chemistry between actors in other films is more sexual than the sex scenes in these films.
well, yeah. There's like to link it to Danny Elfman, like, I would
Mm.
say Batman Returns is a far sexier
Yeah.
film. Do you know what I mean? Like, or like the the Mummy. Do you know what I mean? The Brendan
Oh,
Fraser film, The Mummy, is like kind of like this.
okay.
It's like this kind of. I imagine for a lot of people was like a kind of bisexual sexual awakening of
Well,
how sexy
well,
that film is.
this is what a lot of my bisexual friends have said, that the Mummy is like the bisexual awakening, but also a lot of like, I've put um like the Mummy is for a lot of my male friends a sexual awakening. I personally I feel like it was made for teenage boys, and for some bisexual women it awoke them. I don't think it was necessarily for heterosexual women. Like, for instance, like my fiance is in love with Rachel Weisz, and I think it's because he was into history when he was 12. That film was made for him, and there's like the geeky archaeologist sexy woman, and then lots of other sexy women. And then I've often found that guys who really were into The Mummy when they were like 12, 13, graduated then to that other Rachel Weisz film, which is set in the World War II, I think in Russia, where there's like a really weird sex scene that like I think you see her boobs, but the sex scene takes place under a blanket. Like, I think they graduate from The Mummy to that, and then they're like, okay, now we're teenagers and we watch sexy films. But like, there's a lot of guys I know my age who like Rachel Weisz, like that has been their trajectory. But I would necessarily, like, for me as a teen, like that wasn't for me, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think if we're going down that route of talking about things, I think you have to go earlier. And maybe that's the problem. It's like the 90s was a shallow time for heterosexual women, I'd say. Like, if I had to pick a sexual awakening, it would be like Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones or Star Wars. I think Harrison Ford is the most handsome man in the world ever. I love Indiana Jones, and Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite. This is also a controversial opinion I have that I've shared on other film threads. I think Temple of Doom is the worst Indiana Jones film, including Crystal Skull.
Whoa! I haven't seen any of them in a long time, so I can't. I don't want to pull on that thread too much, but like
a lot
I
of
know
people
that
are
is a
going to be like, I've lost respect for this woman now. But I think, if I may defend myself, Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my favorite films ever altogether. I love that film. I love the relationship between him and God, what's that actress's name? She's in Scrooged as well. I love her.
Carrie Allen?
Yes, Karen Allen. And Last Crusade I also love, like a very close second, but that's also because I lived in Venice and I like got very excited about working out where all of it was filmed. So people would come visit me and I'm like, this is actually the library, but it's actually a church. And they're like, we're not here to see this, Charlie. And I'm like, yeah, but it's exciting. And I just hate Temple of Doom. I hate it. But the one thing I like about Crystal Skull is that Marion comes back, because I love that original romance they have in Raiders. So that's why I put it above Temple of Doom.
Sexier films than 50 Shades of Grey as well, right?
Exactly. They're all sexier films, and especially Raiders, because it's like there's that, they kind of like are annoyed at each other. You still have that kind of conflict. It's still a little bit problematic, but ultimately it's hot. Yeah.
So let's get back to this this
Let's get off my sexual fantasies and back on 50 Shades of Grey.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in this that kind of like, there's a lot of just deliberating whether she's going to sign the contract or not. And I guess a scene we really need to talk about. And like, don't know, we've kind of like skipped. Yeah, so they have that like first sex scene where like, it like, again, it's like, I'm not talking about it to be prude, but there's like not really a lot to talk about, because it all feels very chaste, right? All the sex scenes in this feel very like tame, and it's like, what you get you maybe get like the, I don't know, the whisper of a shaft at one point, like as he's about to pull it out of his trousers, and it's all a bit like,
and like there's some good bum shots. And but I feel like these women have paid to come to the cinema. Let's see a little bit. She is full frontal naked a lot of the time. she is like walking about everything out. Um, hairless completely, which also surprises me for someone who's like, no, I've never had sex before and I don't care about any man. I certainly don't care about you, but I'm smooth as a coot. Like, it's just like, all right. But I mean, if that's what makes you happy, there's like little sort of teases of things. One I've written shibari down here. So there's like a little hints of shibari here and there,
Yeah.
but not only like, oh, I've tied a knot round your wrist. It's like you could be a Boy Scout and do that. Like, it's
Yeah,
not.
and it's done with like I don't know, like I was gonna say felt. That's the wrong thing. But it's done with like a chiffon or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like kind of done with like not a very durable like material. It's not done with ropes or like you get a
Yeah,
bit of
I
like
mean, some
rope
of it
play.
is regular yeah, it's like sort of weird sort of cord rope that you would maybe use for wrapping like a Christmas present.
Mm.
I did ask a friend of mine just before this. I'd actually written in my notes before, I'm not going to say her name, because a friend of mine that I used to work with does do shibari classes, which I thought was really cool, and she did invite me once, and I was like super up for it at one point, and then COVID started, and I was like, this isn't COVID safe. And I messaged her being like, what do you think of the shibari, not quite shibari scenes, but like references to it in the film? And she hadn't seen it, and I'm annoyed that I didn't give her more time to watch it and give me her feedback, because I would have loved her professional opinion on this.
Hopefully she can report back when we get to 50 Shades Darker.
The second film.
Perfect.
I will definitely make sure, because I would love to hear her thoughts on the bondage and stuff in this film.
Well, there's like, so there's some like real fucking bits we probably shouldn't skip over. Is the fact we get that they go for like a country walk, and we find out that like he's had 15 women previous that have been his kind of sex pets. His backstory is that he was abused as a teen by one of his mum's mates. And
that's horrific.
Yeah.
Like, if you read this in the news, you'd be like, that is horrible. What a terrible, terrible life this person has had.
Because they have another sex, and you kind of get that thing of like, oh, is he kind of is his, I don't know, is his exterior breaking down because he sleeps next to her in the bed, and like he's got a big thing about that. He's like, I don't sleep next to anyone. Like, oh,
It feels like an odd thing to like, but then it's like he has breakfast with her and all these, and dances with her and takes her to see his family in his family home. Like, that to me all feels way more intimate, to be like, here's my mother, here's my like, this is my girlfriend, like, do all that, but won't like, oh no, but you can't like sleep in a bed with me. Well, that doesn't make sense.
Because then we get to like, when she's deliberating whether to sign this contract, he is fucking weird. Like, he sends her a new laptop because like, oh, my laptop's broken. Because he's like, why haven't you emailed me back? Why haven't you looked at the documents I've sent you? And like, he just like keeps going over like, and the contract itself, like we talked about earlier, is abusive. It's not the kind of dom sub kind of contract you would have. I don't think it would be a written contract anyway. It would kind of be like, we've agreed to something, but it is, and that is like, from reading, is one of the biggest flaws with this film, is that a contract you would have in that kind of relationship would be fluid, and it at any point,
and built upon verbal communication.
Yes, yeah, and it would be like, hey, whatever we're doing, we'll discuss it. Yes, no, safe word, boom, we'll get out of it. Like, and let's be honest, yellow and red, like, are terrible safe words. Like,
yellow especially seems very unsexy.
Yeah.
I feel like until he said red, I'm like, oh, it's a warning thing. Okay, but like amber would have been a sexier word than yellow.
Unless, I don't know,
red.
Unless Amber's been one of the 15 previous women. Maybe that's what it was.
Possibly.
But,
Possibly.
but yeah, so he like it gets to the point, and it's before we get to this like pivotal scene of the contract, like potential like negotiations. Is he just turns up to her flat at one point, just out of nowhere, kind of
Yes.
he's just there and basically like forces himself upon her. And then like that's when we get the like I've just written it down in my notes as the ice cube shack, because we get like we get some of these like artfully shot shots of like him. Oh, I've got an ice cube and I'm rubbing it on your body and stuff like that. And yeah, I noted down. Oh, it's pretty cool that they've done a shot of him opening a condom, because that is not something you see in films. But like it's like
Oh.
at this point feels a bit little too late in how
Yeah.
fucking
It's like
abusive
of
he is.
everything else he's doing. And it kind of comes to the point of like, well, you're doing that mainly for yourself, almost. It's like, but yeah, the ice cube thing, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But like, again, that's fairly low scale, I feel,
Mhm.
on this kind of sexual journey. Surely. And
Yeah.
I can imagine probably was not comfortable to film either. If you have to have an ice cube in your mouth for like several shots, that must have been annoying.
Yeah, you can imagine like the kind of fingers, especially if it's been rubbed on her body, and they're like, we got to do another take. Get down. We got to
Yeah.
wipe you down with a towel. We got to make sure you're like bone dry again. Get back on the bed. Come on, let's do this. Like,
And I wonder if maybe that's why there's not much sexual chemistry on screen, because maybe when they did a screen test, it was like, ooh, this is sexy. Ooh, there's tension. But when you're shooting in front of a whole bunch of people and you're having to do it multiple times and you're trying to be that open with someone and just be like, yeah, it's a job, it then probably doesn't, like, you lose that chemistry perhaps.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder if that's maybe what happened. I don't know if they had like an intimacy coach. That's like a fairly new thing, I suppose.
Definitely, yeah. This feels, and I think what this film suffers from is such a high budget to some degree.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something about like these. So yeah, so oh no, I've got the box office here. Where's the bloody budget? The budget's $40 million. So this is an expensive
Ooh, yeah.
movie, and it made $569.7 million. I'm glad there is a 69 in there. It feels
But they
only
don't
fitting.
69 in the film.
Exactly.
Like,
Of
it's
course
just,
they don't. Of course
you
they don't.
know,
It's vanilla bullshit.
it's, yeah, there's what, 4 or 5. Wait, okay, so I like that you named one of them the ice shag scenes. Can we give them all nicknames? Let's go from the start. What are they all called?
So
There's,
I don't know. We got the Virgin Springs when she's deflowered.
yeah, the rectifying the Virgin
Situation, yep.
Rectory. And then what happens is that then the ice shag one after that?
I'm trying to think. No, because I think there's one after that, right? Because he no, I think that is the next one. Yeah.
Then there's the flogging in the red 4-poster bed.
Yep. There's that horrible like we'll get to the kind of the final not sex scene, but like kind of
the spanking scene.
Oh yeah, fucking oh Jesus.
So wait, is there really only 3 sex scenes really?
I think you kind of like there's like at least like a glimmer of
like, because there's
one more.
yeah, because there's like a montage after the first like, oh, you've lost your virginity sex scene. She like wanders through to the piano and he like carries her off, and you assume they're gonna go have sex again. God, I can't remember.
It's
But they're all basically like just her on her back. He like tickles her for a bit and then gives her head. Like that's it. That's literally every scene, isn't it?
What I find really funny is there's one moment he's got a peacock feather, and I just think
Yeah.
that's bizarre. Do you know what I mean?
Which one is that in? Is that the virginity one?
No, I think that's late. That's in the playroom. That's one of the playroom ones, I
Right,
think.
okay. So
He's
that's the peacock sex.
Yeah, he's got a peacock feather, like, which is feels weird. Like, I don't know. It just kind of you just a lot of the time you see those in, like, I don't know, middle class people's houses, like in a vase or something like that. Do you know what I
They're
mean? Like,
also like, of all the feathers, I think the least nice feeling, the least sensual, the least soft. They're quite rough.
yeah,
Peacock
they look
feathers, I
rough.
think.
Yeah, I guess like aesthetically quite pleasing, but kind of
Yeah,
like sensory wise, kind of to the touch,
yeah.
probably
And
not the
maybe kind
best.
of symbolic in the sense that it's the male peacock that has the big plumage,
Oh, I
and
like
he is a male, sort of attracting his female, like showing his colors and confidence. But I
that
might be giving them too much
credit on that one. Yeah, yeah.
credit. Eh?
Right. Oh, yeah. So let's talk about this business meeting. And my first question for
Yeah.
you is, why is it so dark in that room?
I know, because considering there's a lot of small print to read, and also, do you know what? It annoys me that I think it's maybe meant to be a joke that she's like, you got my address wrong. And I'm like, that's such a boring, why is this in this scene? That is just admin. That is just admin.
Yeah.
Like, get to talking about, like, I agree with her. Nope. She's like, I've not done a lot of things, but I'm pretty sure I don't want fisting. Fair enough. But then she's like, what are butt plugs? Like, how do you not? I feel like you would know if you
What
know
are
what all
butt
the other
plugs?
things are.
What are butt plugs?
I like that. Sorry, I realized that was the what you used to test my headphones.
Yeah, yeah.
What are butt plugs?
It should be your text alert. Can that be if I ever message you? That's what comes.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll have it as a as a
Text
person.
alert. What
Like,
are butt
What are
plugs?
butt plugs?
I love that it's got like kind of string swell underneath as well. Let's see that one last time.
What are butt plugs?
Danny Elfman doing his finest work.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine. I just kind of think like scoring that. Like, right, what? Like he's there. He's there.
Danny
with,
Elfman scoring water butt plugs.
yeah, he's there with a quill and a nice bit of parchment, kind of writing the score.
You know how, like, when you read the soundtrack of a film, like like you can get like music from the films and they'll have like the names of the scenes. Do you think that bit of the score is called Water Butt Plug?
I reckon it's called something like really pedestrian.
The business
like,
meeting, yeah.
The
But
negotiation.
Yeah. I really hope it's called Water Butt Plug.
Well, like, so this scene, like, it gets to another point that fucking infuriated me, which is this clip, because I just found it so fucking patronizing, the gall of Christian Grey.
Can I just say how impressed I am with your commitment to this meeting?
Ugh.
And in that spirit, I'm gonna throw in a sweetener. How about once a week, on a night of your choosing, we go on a date? Just like a regular couple. Dinner, movie, ice skating, whatever you want.
Accepted.
Gross.
It's gross, isn't it? I'm going to throw in a sweetener. What? I'm going to be a nice person one night a week.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, like...
Also, like, not a nice person. As she keeps saying, it's like, why wouldn't you want to do those things with me anyway? Like,
yeah.
do you really think I'm that vapid a person? Like, you've clearly found me interesting enough up until now. So you saying once I sign this contract, you're just gonna like blindfold me and beat me and whatever, and then never, like, you don't want to talk to me. You don't want to go for dinner with me.
Mhm.
You don't want to go to a pub with me. Like what?
Yeah. It is really one of those, like, I don't know, I'm like those situations where it's like, yeah, you can come over to my flat and have sex, but like, do you know what I mean? Like, make sure you're left like before like any of my flatmates wake up, like kind of
Yeah.
scenarios. Like, it's all real dicey. And then like he says to her in this meeting, "I'd like to fuck you into the middle of next week."
Weak. Yeah.
Ah, which
What is your problem with that phrase?
I
What annoyed you about it?
What annoyed me about it's just like it's overly aggressive. Do you know what I mean? And it's threatening because it's like
Yeah.
it's like I'm like it's I kind of equate it to like, oh, I'm gonna punch you so hard like you'll wake up next week,
Right.
or like,
Okay.
do you know what I mean? I'm gonna like I'm gonna fuck you so hard your clothes are gonna be out of fashion by the time we've stopped. It's like
I found the you're not going to sit down for a week more aggressive.
Yeah.
Because that actually suggests actual pain. But like with that, I think the thing that bothers me with this whole thing is that if he laughed a little bit more, it would be fine. If he'd said that while that was like, God, you know what? I fancy you so much. I want to fuck you into next. Like, I want to keep fucking you until next week. Like, that would maybe
Yeah,
even
yeah.
be charming. But because he never cracks a smile, he never tells a joke, and every time she laughs, he's like, "Take this seriously," and I'm like, you should have a bit of fun at some point.
It feels like the type of thing that like if you ironically watch this film, or like if you watch this with a partner and like both found that line like funny, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would then it would be like, oh, like
Yeah.
next time things are getting hot and heavy, I'm breaking out that fucking line because it would like
Yeah.
it'll bring the house down. And then like what I found hilarious in this scene is he goes full Sherlock Holmes about her blushing, and he's like,
Oh yeah.
he's like, your cheeks are getting red, your pupils are dilating. He's like, you're blushing. You want to have sex with me, don't you? And like obviously like we get, yeah, she's like really shows her power in this. Like, I'm leaving. Do you know what I mean? He's like,
Yeah.
because yeah, doesn't he say like he does? I don't know. The thing I kept thinking about whilst watching this film was, and it's probably like it's a product of this book and this film, is like I used to listen like religiously to My Dad Wrote a Porno, and all I could think was like, was that? Do you know what I mean? It's like his dad's book is probably just as daft as this fucking stuff is.
Exactly. This because I had the same because my thing with because I love My Dad Wrote a Porno as well, and the whole time always like, how is this he's writing this to be sexy. How does he think this is how does he think this is turning people on? And this is exactly how I feel all the way through this film. But what upsets me with this film especially is that it's proven that like, you know, she says like, oh, it's a little sweetener. Like he says like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, take you out for dinner and a movie. It upsets me the idea that were probably women in the cinema watching that being like, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's fine then. I'm like, that's not fine. How are we making this mainstream fine? It's the least fine.
Yeah, it's fucking weird, right? And then like, so we get the graduation. Like
Also, all the time she was graduating, she didn't have a laptop, and I'm like, sure, okay.
yeah, but like then he buys her a fucking car.
Yeah.
And like I've just written here, he's abusing her. She doesn't want this, does she? Like, because she's like, because like then we get, and to your point, something that you kind of wanted like to mention was the mum and like the way that character is written, and we get a scene of her calling her mum, and it just feels like this is only put in here so we can have her kind of express her doubt. She kind of like breaks down and like. It's like, get out of there. How long have you known this guy? Like, that is a question throughout this. I'm like, what is the passage of time throughout all of this? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a
couple
month?
of weeks, which they do say at the graduation. It's like, we've known each other a couple of weeks. I'm like, I guess that makes sense. So, like, why is he pushing her so much? Like, it's not been that long.
But even then, like, the way that line's delivered sounds like a kind of thing of, like, they're lying to make it sound like it's a bit more acceptable to be like, oh, it's been a couple of weeks, as opposed to like, oh, I met him on fucking Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? And like, exactly. I've pretty much been in his fucking pocket ever since.
Yeah. I mean, also my thing about I think she's a shit mum.
Yeah. She's terrible.
She's a shit mum. Because it's like, I hate this also. This whole, I mean, it may also come from the fact that maybe my the fact my this is maybe all saying a lot more about me. But like my relationship with my mum, I think is fairly healthy. I get on well with my mum and my dad. But my mum has always said, like throughout my whole life, she's always, and it sounds kind of cruel, but she's like, "You don't need me to be your friend, do you? You have friends."
Yeah, I get that. I totally
Yeah,
get
and so
that.
like when I see people like, "Oh my god, my mom's my best friend. Oh my mom's my best friend." It's like, your mom shouldn't be your best friend.
Mhm.
She's like twice your age. Get your own friends. She should get her own friends.
Yeah,
She should be your
yeah.
mum. And like her mum not showing up to her graduation because her boyfriend hurt his ankle or something. And it's like, he's a grown man. Like, this is your only daughter. Go to her graduation.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And then she gets pissy with her because she's like, "Oh, I heard about your new boyfriend. That I had to hear about it from Ray." And it's like, well, you would have heard about it too if you'd shown up to her fucking graduation. Like, the reason you're hearing about it from your ex-husband is because your ex-husband went to the graduation. And so like this whole thing, and it's like, "Oh, I'm getting drunk with my daughter." And I'm like, take some responsibility. Give your daughter some proper advice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's my rant about the mum figure.
well, yeah. The thing is, like, so he gets the fucking arseache because she goes to visit her mum, and it's like, again,
Mm,
it's get out of there. Like, what is
yeah.
wrong with you going to see your going to see her mum, and then even then he just turns up out of fucking nowhere.
Uninvited.
Oh, it's just so like I was like, I'm speechless. I'm
Oh,
fucking
do you,
speechless at this shit.
do you know what my least favorite bit of that scene is? When he shows up, when the mum and they're drinking, um, is when he shows up and he orders them gin and tonics, and he goes to the waiter. He's like, "Cucumber with the Hendrix, lime with the Bombay Sapphire," and it's like, yeah, we all know that's how you drink gin. That's obviously like, I drink a lot of gin. I know that's how you drink gin. I would never say that to a waiter. How rude is that?
Yeah.
Like, just assume the waiter knows what they're doing, and if they don't, who gives a shit? It's a gin and tonic. Just leave it. Who do you think you're showing off to here?
But
You're just proving you're a cunt to waiters.
and the fact you can only assume that the mum is supposed to be like a conduit for the audience in that, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a man after my own heart," and it's like,
Yeah, it's
really?
like, "Oh, a man who knows how to order a gin and tonic."
Yeah,
It's like, fuck off.
get a fucking life. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. Like, she seems genuinely upset, like, with the fact that not only as like to get his own back on her, he goes for a meal with his abuser the night before. So it's
Yeah.
like that's even more kind of like mind game fuckery that he's pulling. He's turned up
Yeah.
uninvited, kind of made her feel like shit, kind of like, I don't know, like she's there almost like groveling to the fact that like, "Oh, I've broken the contract. I've been drinking," and it's like you shouldn't have to feel
I
bad
know
about
the whole
enjoying
bit in the
yourself.
contract about like, you will eat healthy foods and you will drink this and all this. Like, it, like, I feel, I mean, first of all, that's ridiculous. Like, eat and drink what you want. But also, the theme that runs through the film a lot with me in this is this idea of her being like pure and the purity of it. It's like, "Oh no, you never drink. Oh no, you never smoke. You never take drugs. You're just this perfect little pristine virgin kitten
Mm.
until I want to have my way with you." That it's like she's only worthwhile in his eyes if she's like this sort of form of pureness.
Yeah, well,
It's
I've
like,
written in my notes he's evil because like what he does, like he's evil.
yeah, yeah. But it bothers me that a woman also then wrote this character as a sexy character
Mhm.
for women to find attractive. And I'm like, that's not something you should want. If I had a daughter and it was like, "Yeah, no, my this boyfriend, he won't let me drink a gin and tonic with you unless he's ordered it." My mum would be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah,
Like,
well, like
get rid.
because what he does is he breaks her down, like, and then like,
Mm.
and then just does something like does a big grand gesture to be like, "Oh, it's all right now. Like, you're gonna come and do what's on my agenda, right?" And she's like, I guess you're taking me out on a little plane, a little kind of glider, and it's like, no, this is
Yeah.
not how it fucking works.
No, no.
Oh,
Yeah, that was the other time my partner walked in. He's like, "Why are they in a glider?" And I'm
yeah,
like, "Just stop asking questions."
just looking really fucking
I can't
goofy as well. They
explain.
look really like goofy whilst they're like right. It was like I'm sure that was a fun day filming that,
Yeah,
but like it's kind of not doing anything for the plot of this film.
yeah. I guess there's meant to be some sense of like he's in control and she's like in free fall, like in his hands, and it's like that's maybe a metaphor for something. But again, I think I could be giving it all too much credit. Like,
Well, because this all happened like in like the last half hour of the film as well, and like so when they have that falling out about her going back to her mum, this is
mm,
when we get his like backstory of why he is so
yeah.
messed up, and possibly one of my favorite reveals in the film.
The woman that gave birth to me
God.
was a crack addict and a prostitute. She died when I was 4. I remember certain things. Terrible things.
I don't know what like really is that the kind of backstory we're giving for him, like, and it's
Yeah.
again, it's manipulative to the audience because it's supposed to be like, oh, feel sympathy for this guy, and it's like, no, because like if like just because you've been abused does not give you the right to abuse someone else.
Yeah, and well, also it pisses me off. Like his whole thing through, like she set up because what I feel the narrative, the like what they're wanting the audience to be like is like, oh, don't be so stuck up and prudish, Anastasia. He's so handsome and rich. Just be sexually liberated like him.
Yeah,
And as because he keeps being like, have an open mind, be open minded. It's like the problem's not that she's not being open minded. The problem is that he's had a traumatic past that he's refusing to deal with and just like putting his own abuse on somebody else. Like, that's not healthy.
yeah.
That's not called having an open mind. It's called not going to therapy.
That like, and that's the thing, like, because he like flip flops, like, because obviously, yeah, he gets things back to how he wants, like, once he like gets her like back from her mum's, back from Georgia, and then
Yeah.
kind of strops off because, like, again, he's got to do business things that we have no
His
idea what he's
business that
actually
we know
doing.
nothing about.
Nothing about.
Occasionally they give money to poor people in Africa. I've written that somewhere. It's like, oh, so you do, and it's like, yep, all of Africa, given all the poor in Africa. Like, okay, just that. Cool.
Ah, then like,
So bad.
because
Um,
that's
yeah.
when we get like, yeah, he takes like because he's so riled up, he takes her and flogs her, and like I was just like that thing of he doesn't need a sex slave, he needs a punching bag and some therapy.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? He
Yeah,
just needs to like vent his anger, not on a fucking living being.
yeah. The whole thing makes no sense. And she's totally right to like walk out on him. Because the whole thing is like, and him being like, oh, but it's all about pleasure, not pain. It's like, she is not getting pleasure from this.
Mhm.
She is not getting pleasure from the idea of this contract. Like, it's not working. You're the one being close minded.
Yeah, I like because like I should have pulled this clip, but like we get the kind of confrontation at the end, and like she pushes him and says like, "Why do you feel the need to like punish me all the time?"
Mm.
And then he delivers the line, "I'm 50 shades of fucked up."
Stop.
Oh, it's like,
I burst out laughing
yeah,
at that
me
bit.
too. Like I was like, really, really, like, is this what this film equates to? Because this is like in the kind of throes of the end of the film, right? And it's like this is like, it spurs her on to say like, show me what you want to do to me, basically. And he takes her back to the playroom and like she wants to know the worst, like the kind of the 11 on the scale of fucking fucked up that he wants to go to, and he slaps her on the bum 6 times.
I mean, yeah, and it's like, I think Dakota Johnson does a good job of being like, well, this is traumatic for me. And it's like, yeah, because it's clearly like a painful thing. I did feel like cinematically, it was like, it's not that I'm a sadist and I want to see like scars on her butt, but I'm like, we should have seen the scars on her butt. Like, we should have seen how aggressive and how wrong this was. It's like, this guy is awful. This is hurting. Like, because we only ever saw it from far away. And it could be easy for some people to be like, well, she seems a little upset by it, but it's probably not too bad.
Yeah.
But actually, like, there's been so many like scenes where like, oh, did you watch The Terror? It's a TV show that was on earlier
No.
this year. I mean, there's a horrible like flogging scene in that, set on a ship, and it's like, flogging is an actual punishment, which is
Yeah.
what this is technically meant to be. He's punishing her. And like, when you usually see scenes like that in cinema, it's like, you see like the red and like bruises and stuff. You see nothing like that.
Yeah.
And I get, because it's not sexy and it's not attractive, and we shouldn't want to find that attractive. But also, we shouldn't be finding any of that scene attractive anyway. It should be the scene where we're like, oh yeah, he's a dick and a psychopath.
But it's filmed in the same way that all the other kind of like playroom
all the other
scenes
sex
are.
scenes are
Yeah,
filmed.
so
Yeah.
it's like this needs to be different. This needs to be
Yeah.
stark. Like, if this was just like a kind of a one shot, just, do you know what I mean? Like a kind of wide shot, just like hanging on it. That would have like really ramped up the kind of the tension of it. And
It needed to be one or the other. It needed to be that sort of, that, as you say, like a wide shot, or as I'm saying, like fully like seeing the actual implicate, like the actual marks of it. But instead it was just like medium shot, she's crying, and he's just like counting down from 10. I don't know. And it's like, yeah, it was pretty shit, but it's like that shit, but in reality, that would have been horrific. And you just didn't get that from the film at all.
And it's like the inciting incident in this film, right? Because it's kind of like, there's not really like, it's quite scant on plot, really, for a film that kind of, I don't know, like it's and like, so that we're wrapping up what happens in this film now, like, so that leads to them kind of having a big old dust up, and she leaves, but just goes to her separate room in the apartment. It's like, get out of there.
She doesn't get out the house. Get out the house. Yeah. Leave.
It felt like, I felt like I was watching like a slasher movie. Do you know what I mean? Like when they're kind of like, get out of the house, get out of that. Like, Michael Myers is still alive. Like, it's kind of like you're at the end of Halloween. It's like, just get the fuck out of there. And then they like, what, it culminates in them kind of having an argument. And then she's like, I am leaving. Goodbye, Mr. Grey. And then gets on the lift. Dun, dun, dun. And then it's curtains, right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get why she doesn't get out of the house, because that's what happens in an abusive relationship. That you kind of feel like confused, and you're like, oh, maybe it was my fault. I don't. Also, she's in a different, like, because he's in Seattle or something, and that's not where she lives. Like, she needs to get a helicopter back or something.
Yeah.
It's like, so like, I can see why she's like, oh, I'm just confused, and then she's like, yeah, you know what, I am gonna head off. But if anything, that should just show you, it's like, yeah, he's properly like manipulated her. He's properly got her under his finger. What more could he want? He's an abusive person. She shouldn't be in a relationship with him.
So what did you make of the ending of this film?
You know what? It's probably the thing I liked the most. The whole film was the end, and not just because it was over. Because it was kind of like, oh, it's ending there. Fair enough. I feel like it could have ended there 30 minutes ago and not 2 hours and so on. And I am curious to watch the next film because it does feel like a cliffhanger. But
Yes.
you've wrote on Twitter something that there's an alternative ending, right?
So yes, there is
Right.
there is an alternative ending to this film,
Oh my God.
which doesn't add much.
Right.
All it adds is it's just a bit more, and it's just both of them moping around, like her crying in a taxi, and you get kind of like flashbacks to like them enjoying themselves, like riding on the
That one
helicopter,
time.
like them in the glider and stuff like that. So it is very like it's very bizarre, like that there is there's a bit more. And I saw a lot of people, like, because I had to watch it on YouTube, like to see this, and there's people going, well, that's not that's in the book, so what, like, why is it not in the film? And it's like, well, it is on the unrated DVD, like Blu-ray, like copy of it, but it did. Somebody had written on underneath on YouTube. We'll shout her out. Her name is Boink Hannah. Wrote
Amazing.
spoilers, and then somebody called James. So that was 3 years ago. Somebody called James 2 months ago responded with, I know this is 3 years old, but girl, shut the fuck up. LMAO. Like,
Spoilers. But like, she could have seen, I'm sure the original ending's also on YouTube, probably. Like,
and it's in the
Why-
fucking title of, like,
why are you YouTubing alternative ending to a film you've not seen?
exactly. It's going to be in the title of the video. Like, don't watch
wow.
it.
So does anything plot-wise actually? There's nothing actually different.
Nothing
it's
plot.
just
No,
that
it's just kind of the aftermath of that decision of her leaving.
of them being like, "Oh, do I regret this or not?"
yeah,
Because
it's
we did
like,
have some nice times.
well, I guess all it does is it seeds in that fact that, like, like the story's not over, and it's like
Right.
everybody knew going into this film that it was going to be a free picture deal. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody, it's it's like that
Talking
thing of it's,
horrific alternative endings, have you ever seen the terrible alternative ending for the Pride and Prejudice movie?
no.
The Keira Knightley one. Oh,
Is that the
you
one that
should
has what's his name? Is it Tom McFadden, who's in
Matthew McFadden?
Matthew McFadden, who's
Yeah.
brilliant as Tom on Succession.
Yeah, he's also, so him and Keira Knightley are also in Anna Karenina, and they're really fun in that because they're like playing older characters. With Aaron Taylor Johnson,
Yes.
who's our guy, you know, and he's very hot in that film. But yeah, at the end of Pride and Prejudice, because Pride and Prejudice ends with them being like, "We're gonna get married," and that's it. And you're like, great. She ends up with Mr. Darcy. They're gonna get married, live happily ever after. But apparently there was an alternative ending, I think, for American cinemas, where it's like them after their wedding, and it's really cringy, and they're like kissing by a lake, and she's like, "What are you gonna call me?" And he's like, "I'll call you Mrs. Darcy," and like all these, like all his pet names for her. It's the most cringeable thing I've ever watched. Please look it up. It's great. It's really good.
Amazing.
And so I wondered if it was something like that, where it was like, oh, we need something for the audiences who need like a bit more. But no, it still ends with them.
I think it was just a way to shift more like physical, like media copies of it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
yeah. And I think they've, like, I don't know. I've actually got it on Blu-ray, but annoyingly the Blu-ray didn't work. So
Oh no.
That is
Oh, I'd
£2.50.
love to see the other special features.
Yeah, I will report back when we get to 50 Shades Darker if I'm more
Oh
knowledgeable
wow.
on stuff that
It's
was
fun.
left on the cutting room
I
floor.
have I have literally no idea what happens in the rest of the films. I think at some point they do get married. I think I saw that spoiler. And I think at some point, I'm assuming from like the front cover of the book, there's like a masked ball. Um,
Hmm. Right,
so those are things I know, and that's it.
so as we wrap this up,
Mm.
like what do you want to see in the next
Oh,
film? What changes, what tweaks do you want to see in 50 Shades Darker?
I mean, I'd like to see that he goes and gets some therapy or something, and
Hmm.
like starts to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe my whole way of doing stuff isn't as open minded as I thought. Maybe I've got some issues. Um, I think that would be nice. I would like to maybe see him give her the opportunity to be in charge a bit. Because this is the other thing. It's like in this film, he's like, yeah, I spent like several years as a submissive and now I'm a doctor. It's like, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think it's like a career progression where you like do an internship as a submissive and then that allows you to become a dominant. I feel like surely it's more that your personality is either suited to one or
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
other. And so like him, it's like, well, this woman obviously assumed you were a submissive, and it turns out you actually prefer being a dominant. You're assuming that she's a submissive. Maybe she would prefer to be a dominant.
Yeah, maybe they're both, yeah,
So
a switch. Yeah. I
yeah, I
think
would like to maybe see them switch it up a bit.
perfect.
What
Well,
about you?
what would I like to see in the next one? I would like to see. Well, looking at the
I'd
poster,
also like
I
to see
think
his penis.
the masked ball may be in the next one because that is the poster for 50
Yeah,
Shades Darker. So,
right.
I weirdly, I want to see some more Rita Ora. I want to see like
Uh-huh.
I want to find out a bit more about his family. I want to know if that is kind of actually addressed, the abuse. So like
Yeah,
if that is kind of like delved into and kind of like given
yeah.
the treatment it kind of like really warrants in this film to kind of I
Mm.
I, I don't think we're going to. I think we're just gonna have to like be like, oh, well, that is his past. We're gonna leave it there because we need to make it titillating and
Yeah.
exciting for
Because
people.
also the actress that plays his mum, it really annoyed me for ages. I couldn't work out what I'd seen her in, and I remembered she's in Mona Lisa Smile, which is a film I really love, and she's really good in it. And I feel like I'd like to see more of that actress. Um, but on that sort of theme, have you seen there's a documentary on Netflix about these two identical twin brothers who like had a similar thing, like their mother's friends used to abuse like their mother used to basically rent them out from their like they had this really posh family estate. You seen this? It's
No.
really interesting. And
No.
then his identical twin brother had some kind of like car accident when he was like 18 and like got amnesia and forgot all about this abuse. So the twin brother decided to like start anew and be like not tell his brother about all this sexual abuse they'd had as like teenagers and kids.
Whoa.
Um until like their mother then died and they were like in their 40s. And it's super intense. Um but it's really interesting and it's all about how like, you know, this upper class family like basically like just overlooked all this abuse. And I kind of feel like that's kind of what's happened here. This is a really traumatic thing that we're just like, if it had been, and again, it's like if this was if Christian was a woman, and it's like, yeah, when I was 15, one of my dad's friends made me his submissive,
Hmm.
you'd be like, whoa, like that wouldn't be allowed as like a mainstream film. We'd be like upset about it. I don't think it's like, you're right. I feel like it should be examined, but I feel it won't be,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's the place to examine it.
Well, we've talked about things that we want to see in the second
Right.
one. Things that we definitely will and won't be seeing. So we will be seeing the return, obviously, of Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan It looks like Rita Ora is higher up on the cast listing, and we will
Okay.
also see an appearance from Kim Basinger in the sequel.
Oh.
So that feels like something to look forward to. One thing we won't be seeing is the return of Sam Taylor Johnson behind the director's chair.
Oh.
She is then replaced by James Foley, who
Right.
I believe would have brought in our Coppola connection for that episode, which will be cinematographer John Schwartzman. So that's when
Right.
we really get into the world of the Coppola family and what it's all about when we talk about 50 Shades Darker.
Wow. So this is kind of this is a setup for that episode, really.
I have broken the rules to talk about this film, Charlie. This yeah, I set myself some hard rules, and I've broken them for this.
Wow.
I hope that the listeners at home have enjoyed this. If you've suffered through to this point, because I think it's been a very fun. I've loved this conversation. I just hope that this isn't one that people skip over because like,
There's no actual Coppola connection.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to admit, I misread your messages to me when I was like, "What is the connection?" You're like, "Oh, it's Josh Schwartzman," and I started in my head. I think because I was still on the Mr. Banks thread, I got halfway through this film and I'm like, "When's Jason Schwartzman coming in?" And then I was like, "Of course he's not in this film. What am I doing?" But this is my question to you: if he were in this film, who would he play?
I reckon he would be relegated to like the Jose character, a Jose type. Do you know what I mean? Like he like that. He's I don't know. He's not. He seems far too short to play Mr. Grey. Like he's not a Christian.
I would have liked to have maybe seen him as Tyler, the driver who goes and buys her clothes.
Brilliant.
Because I would have loved to have watched him go shopping for clothes for her.
Or the brother, or his brother Elliot.
Yes, who just sleeps with everyone.
Yeah, I can imagine him like. Yeah, I think it would have been great. He kind of would have really like, I don't know, hammed it up a bit. I could imagine him playing it a bit like how Kieran Culkin plays Roman Roy on Succession, like quite sarky and sneering a lot of the time and being a real dick. Yeah, one of those two.
Fun.
That would have been fun.
See, I would have wished him to be in this film, but I don't think we're going to see him.
Unfortunately, no. Jason Schwartzman is not in any of these films. His older brother just was the cinematographer. So, thank you so much, Charlie, for coming and talking to me about 50 Shades of Grey.
Thank you for having me.
I very much look forward to having you back to talk about 50 Shades Darker, and then again to talk about 50 Shades Freed. Where can people keep up to date with you and everything you're doing, whether it's comedy, acting, all that kind of jazz? What's the best way to keep up to date?
So probably Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Charlie Vero-Martin. On Facebook, I'm on at Charlie Vero-Martin Comedy, and I have my website, Charlie Vero-Martin. And yeah, so I usually post upcoming gigs and stuff I'm doing there.
Amazing. Well, I'm gonna close you out on only thing that is fitting at the end of this podcast.
What are butt plugs?
And there we have it, guys. The first outing into the 50 Shades of Grey saga. If you're a massive fan of this film and you feel like me and Charlie might have done it dirty, don't hesitate to get in touch. You can do so on all the social medias. So that is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd, all at Caged In Pod. And be sure to follow those as well, especially Letterboxd. You get to maybe get an early glimpse of what I think of these films, whether it's for a star rating or sometimes put a little review like I did for 50 Shades of Grey. 2 stars, baby. Thank you again to Charlie for joining me. It was, I can't think of anyone better to be embarking on this weird and wonderful journey through the 50 Shades saga with, and I can't wait to have that second conversation to release, to you guys during that Christmas perineum, that kind of no man's land week you get between Christmas and New Year, baby. We're going to be back to give you a little saucy treat that hopefully you might have to listen away from the prying ears of your family. You're having that little alone time in your childhood bedroom or wherever you're staying over that Christmas period. Or maybe you've vacated already back to your cushy flat wherever you live, or your family home away from relatives, and you're enjoying it. Anyway, speaking of Christmas, next week we kick off with one of 2 Christmas films we'll be talking about over the festive period, and it is the 1985 world peace solving film Rocky 4, baby. And yes, it is a Christmas film. That fight takes place on the 25th of December, so we're taking it as a Christmas film. I was joined by Stu Whiffen for that one, who is the host of too many podcasts to mention, and I mentioned all of them on next week's episode. And Stu's a wonderful guy, and it was the perfect guest to talk about this film. He has such an amazing story of when he first saw it, and can't wait for you guys to hear it. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so in a manner of ways. If you'd like to do so by giving me some money, one of the ways you can do that is by going to ko-fi.com/cagedinpod. You can buy me a nice little digital cup of coffee. It's a one-off payment, and it's nice and easy, and it keeps keeping these lights on over here at Caged In Towers. Or if you want to really make a commitment, if you feel like, hey, Petros, he's a nice guy, I feel things are going steady with the podcast, I've been enjoying it for a good long while, I want to take it to the next level, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/cagedinpod, where you will have access to Movie Brat Bros, the brand new podcast that will be launching this coming January, and will be a deep dive look at the films of Brian De Palma and all the other movie brats as well over time. But the first season will be Brian De Palma, and that'll be fortnightly, and you will get that twice a month. I shouldn't say fortnightly, because that could sway things off, and it won't be fortnightly. It'll be twice a month you'll get those episodes. But that's as little as £2.50 or $3 a month. So yeah, you can't sniff at that for basically a completely other podcast. However, if you don't want to part with any cash, you can support this podcast, like I said, by following on the socials, or you can head on over to Apple Podcasts, Acast, or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, and leave a spanking 5-star rating and review. So as always, guys, I have been Petros Patsilivas, your guide through the crazy world of the Coppola family tree. Well, maybe not this week, but however, remember to keep it caged in, and I'll catch you next time.